Chapter 1. The Man the Whole Town Owed. On the morning Walter Graves was buried, the bells of First Methodist rang 12 times, even though it was only 9 o'clock. The church custodian said it was a tradition reserved for citizens who had rendered extraordinary service to Bellwether, but Nathan Cole stood beneath the stone portico and knew the real reason was simpler. 12 bells lasted long enough to make everyone crossing the town square stop, lift their heads, and remember that today they were losing someone important. 2 rows of funeral wreaths lined the church steps, most of them bearing the names of organizations Walter had funded. Graves Community Clinic, the School Breakfast Fund, the Morrow County Veterans Association, the Youth Baseball League. A small card stood among the white lilies. He saved our family. There was no signature. Cole read the words twice. Inside, nearly 400 people filled the pews. Latecomers stood along the walls, while the local television station had set up a camera behind the pulpit. Mayor Harlan Pierce delivered the eulogy in a voice carefully trained to catch at exactly the right moments. He recalled how Walter had handed out free medication during the blackout winter of 2018, mortgaged his house to save the clinic, paid college tuition for 17 low-income students, and treated every person as though their dignity had nothing to do with the amount of money in their pocket. Every sentence was met with solemn nods. Cole sat in the last pew beside State Police Captain Ellen Shaw. Neither wore a uniform, but the people of Bellwether still knew they were cops. Now and then someone glanced back, the question plain in their eyes. Why were these two still sitting here when Walter Graves' killer had not been caught? Shaw kept her voice below the reach of the row in front of them. Are you listening to the eulogy or counting the exits? Cole kept his eyes on the pulpit. Both. Tilting her head, Shaw asked just as quietly, "What's bothering you?" The mayor was recounting another of Walter's good deeds when Cole answered without looking away. Nobody has 400 people who love him and no enemies. Maybe he really was a good man, Shaw murmured. Good men still have enemies, Cole said after a beat. Sometimes more than most. In the front pew, Police Chief Ray Dunham sat upright with both hands resting on his knees. He was 58, gray at the temples, and looked more tired than he did in newspaper photographs. When the mayor mentioned Walter's funding of free medication for chronically ill children, Dunham's jaw tightened. Only for a second. Then he bowed his head like everyone else. Cole filed the reaction away without assigning it meaning. Reverend Caldwell spoke last. He did not list Walter's achievements. Instead, he said Walter had one beautiful flaw. He did not know how to turn away a person in need. A faint laugh moved through the church, the kind people used to keep tears from spilling. Then the Reverend looked down at the dark wooden coffin beneath the pulpit and said the town had lost the best man it had ever known. This time, no one laughed. After the service, Cole stood in the graveyard behind the church and watched the mourners touch the coffin one by one before leaving. A woman in an old coat bent and kissed the polished lid. The owner of an auto shop removed his cap and held it against his chest for a long time. 2 teenagers in baseball uniforms stood shoulder to shoulder with red eyes. None of them looked around to see whether a camera was watching. The grief was real. That made the case harder, not easier. Dunham approached after the last mourner had left the graveside. He offered Cole a hand, his palm dry and cold. "Detective Cole," Dunham said, holding the gesture between them. "Thank you for coming." Cole shook it as a matter of procedure, not gratitude. "It's my case." Dunham withdrew his hand and watched the departing crowd. "Some people still think a funeral is private." "Murder isn't private," Cole replied, meeting his eyes. Dunham held the look a second longer than necessary, but showed no offense. "The pharmacy has been resealed. I told my people not to go back in without you." Cole gave one short nod, almost too small to be anything but acknowledgement. "You did the right thing. We all want whoever did this caught." Dunham glanced toward the wreaths. Walter didn't deserve to die that way. Cole did not answer at once. He had heard those words many times during 13 years in homicide, usually from people who did not yet know what the dead had done behind closed doors. But in Bellwether, the statement did not sound automatic. It sounded like shared faith. "No one deserves to be killed without a trial," Cole said at last. He had believed that since before his younger brother died. Dunham nodded as though they had just affirmed a principle beyond debate. Then we understand each other. Cole watched the coffin descend. The straps tightened and slid across the lowering device with a faint rasp. A clod of dirt broke from the edge of the grave and scattered over the lid. "We'll find out," Cole said, still watching the coffin. Dunham turned toward him. "Find out what?" Cole looked back at the chief, his voice low but every word distinct. "Whether we really understand each other." Chapter 2. The Pharmacy After Midnight. Graves Pharmacy stood at the corner of Ash Street and 3rd, across from Town Hall. Its green neon sign had been dark since the night Walter died, except for the letter G, which still flickered unevenly, glowing and failing like a signal from a machine on its last circuit. Behind the front windows, photographs of Walter shaking hands with poor families, presenting scholarships, and standing beside the mayor remained untouched. Crime scene tape crossed his face in the largest picture. Cole entered through the front door at 7 the next morning. The smell of disinfectant was fresh, too fresh for the thin layer of dust beneath the shelving. Someone had wiped the register counter and the tile floor behind it, but missed the darkness under the cabinet lip. There, a crime scene technician had found 3 brown drops of blood, so small they could have been mistaken for rust unless a person bent close. Walter had been found in the office behind the counter, his head resting against the leg of the desk. A .22 caliber bullet had entered behind his right ear at close range. There was no sign of a struggle. The safe was closed. No cash was missing. The front door had been locked from the inside, and the rear door showed no damage. The security cameras had continued running, but the footage from 11:38 to 11:49 p.m. had disappeared from the server. 11 minutes. Standing beside the desk, Shaw swept her gaze across the room. Whoever did this knew what to wipe, knew where the recordings were stored, and knew Walter would open the door. Or Walter let them in before closing, Cole said, studying the chair shoved against the wall. One leg had cut a fresh scratch into the floor. No unidentified prints, Shaw noted, looking over the powdered surfaces. Because they wiped them. Cole crouched beside a damp streak near the base of the cabinet. Only the obvious places. Shaw pointed to the handle of the lower desk drawer. "We have a partial here that isn't Walter's." Cole leaned closer. The print was incomplete, enough to submit but perhaps not enough to match. He did not touch it. Beneath the desk lay a tipped paper cup. The ice had melted into a small pool and dried at the edges. A faint smear of nearly clear lip balm marked the rim. Walter did not use lip balm. "A woman?" Shaw asked. "Or a kid?" Cole replied, looking at the translucent mark. Shaw kept one finger on the duty calendar. "Walter usually stayed late?" Cole opened the schedule already sealed in an evidence sleeve. 3 nights a week. He personally inventoried controlled medication. The top drawer contained pens arranged in parallel lines, paper clips sorted into a small box, and receipts bound by month with rubber bands. Living people could be orderly. So could people who hid things. Along the edge of the drawer, Cole found a clean rectangle in the dust, roughly the size of a notebook. Something was removed, Cole said, his eyes still on the clean rectangle in the dust. Shaw looked over his shoulder. "Or local police took it." Cole pointed to the blank evidence transfer section on the scene log. "It isn't listed. Dunham says his officers only checked for a pulse and secured the building," Shaw reminded him. Cole straightened. A wooden plaque from Graves Community Clinic hung on the wall. Its right corner was less than half an inch out of alignment. He lifted it away. There was no hidden safe behind it, only a new screw and a patch of paint cleaner than the rest. Something else had hung there and later been removed. "Photograph this," Cole ordered as he replaced the plaque exactly as he had found it. Shaw called over a technician. In the stockroom, they found 2 details that did not fit a robbery. First, a box of nitrile gloves had been pulled from a shelf and left beside the sink, yet no used gloves were in the trash. Second, a bottle of isopropyl alcohol had been opened, and its mouth was still wet when police arrived. The killer had taken the gloves away or destroyed them elsewhere. This had been planned. Cole stepped through the rear door. A narrow alley ran beside the brick wall toward a shared parking lot used by the laundromat and a thrift store. The exterior camera above the door pointed toward the dumpsters, but after the missing 11 minutes, it showed only darkness. Near the step, a technician had marked a small shoe print, worn along the outer heel. Rain that night had blurred most of the tread. Size 6 or 7, the technician said, crouched over the washed-out print. Woman? Shaw asked. Or a teenager, the technician answered. Cole looked from the print to the door. The lock was intact. According to the personnel file, only Walter, the morning manager, and pharmacy technician Diane Marsh had keys. Diane claimed she had lost hers 2 months earlier, but the lock had never been changed because Walter considered the expense unnecessary. We start with her, Shaw said. Cole did not answer. He returned to the office and studied the paper cup again. Near the place where Walter had fallen, a crescent-shaped wipe mark stopped short at the edge of the desk, leaving a long brown hair trapped beneath the lamp base. The scene had not been cleaned perfectly. The killer knew what to do, but had not had much time. The 11 missing minutes might have been the entire window they needed, or they might have been only the part someone else wanted gone. Cole stood in the room where Walter had dispensed free medicine to hundreds of people, reviewed children's medical files, and written checks for patients who could not pay. A photograph on the desk showed Walter kneeling to tie a little boy's shoe. One corner of the frame had been wiped cleaner than the others, as though someone had picked it up many times. Behind the frame, Cole found a piece of paper folded into quarters. One sentence had been written in blue ink. I told my mother you would never stop. There was no name. Chapter 3. The woman he forgave. Diane Marsh's name appeared in a police file from 3 years earlier, not for violence, but for stealing medication. She had been caught hiding 2 bottles of antibiotics and a box of insulin in her purse. The total value was under $400, but the camera footage was clear, and the night manager had called police before Walter arrived. The file ended with an unusual note. Business owner declines prosecution. Offender agrees to restitution through volunteer service. Cole found the newspaper story from that week in the Bellwether Gazette archive. Its headline covered half the page. Good man forgives struggling mother. In the photograph, Walter's hand rested on Diane's shoulder. She was thin, her hair tied low, and she stood behind the pharmacy counter with a smile that never reached her eyes. The Graves Foundation sign had been positioned in the exact center of the frame. The article said Walter had chosen mercy over punishment. It described Diane as a single mother who had lost her way in desperation and later become a foundation volunteer. Walter was quoted 3 times. Diane was not quoted once. Cole read the article again from the beginning. What disturbed him was not what had been written. It was the way every sentence closed too neatly, as though the story had been arranged so carefully that the woman in the photograph no longer had room to say anything else. Diane lived in an apartment above the laundromat, 2 blocks from the pharmacy. She opened the door after Cole's second knock, wearing an oversized sweatshirt and holding an unlit cigarette between 2 fingers. When he identified himself, her eyes dropped to his badge and then to his shoes. You already took my fingerprints, Diane said from the doorway. And my spare key. I don't have anything else. Cole remained outside the threshold rather than forcing his way into the apartment. You can answer a few questions. Diane rolled the cigarette between her fingers. What if I don't? We still ask, Cole replied in the same official tone. A breath of laughter escaped her nose as she opened the door wider. At least you're honest. The apartment was small but clean. For unopened bills lay on the kitchen table beside a nearly empty box of insulin and a photograph of a smiling girl of about 10 standing beside a lake. Cole recognized her from the old report. Lily Marsh, type 1 diabetes. He glanced through the kitchen before asking, Were you working at the pharmacy the night Walter died? Diane leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. My shift ended at 8. Was the back door locked? Cole asked. Diane lowered her gaze to the cigarette. I think so. You think? Cole repeated, leaving the uncertainty exposed. Scraping the paper around the filter with her thumbnail, Diane said, The lock sticks. You have to pull the door toward you while turning the key. Sometimes I forget to pull. Cole watched tiny scraps of paper fall to the floor. Did you forget that night? I don't know. Diane answered too quickly. as though the words had been waiting behind her teeth. The answer came fast, but her thumb kept worrying at the cigarette. More paper fell. Did you hate Walter Graves? Cole asked. Diane looked up. That the question police use after they decide a poor person must have a motive? It's the question I use for anyone with a key to a murder scene, Cole replied after a beat. My key was lost, Diane said, tapping one fingernail against the tabletop. You could be lying. Cole did not look away. Could be. Diane pulled out a chair and Saturday, you want the pretty version or the ugly one? Cole set the article between them. The true one. A small smile touched Diane's mouth and died before it became a sound. There isn't one. She was quiet for a moment, then continued. Walter saved my daughter. Lily's insulin that month cost more than the rent. I took it. He could have sent me to jail, but he didn't. He paid for a lawyer, gave me a part-time job, and every time a reporter came, he told me to stand beside him. Cole did not argue about Walter's kindness. He brought the question back to Diane's choice. You agreed. I needed the job, Diane said, looking at the nearly empty insulin box. Did Walter force you? Cole asked directly. Her eyes moved to her daughter's photograph. He never said, if you don't smile, I'll fire you. He just called me into his office before every photo, put his hand on the desk, and reminded me that everyone deserved a second chance. You heard that as a threat? Cole leaned forward slightly. He heard it as kindness. Diane finally lit the cigarette, but did not inhale. That's the problem. Cole removed a printout of the article from his file. You've read this. 7 times, Diane said, each word measured, her eyes fixed on the page. Why? Cole asked. Because they reprint it every year when the foundation needs money. Diane touched the photograph with one fingertip. The woman in that story isn't me. She's proof that Walter was good. Poor enough, wrong enough, grateful enough. People look at her and see him. Cole touched the yellowed edge of the page. What do you see? Diane looked straight at him. I see myself still having to thank the man who used my humiliation to raise money. The kitchen went quiet. The refrigerator compressor kicked on and rattled softly. Lily coughed in the next room, followed by the creak of a bed. Diane crushed the unsmoked cigarette into the sink. Where were you between 11 and midnight? Cole asked. Here, Diane answered immediately. Lily's blood sugar crashed. Her meter saves the time. We'll verify it, Cole said, closing his notebook. I know, Diane replied dryly. Do you know anyone who wanted Walter dead? Cole continued. Diane looked out the window toward the green neon sign at the end of the street. The whole town had a reason to want him alive. That isn't an answer, Cole said. It's the only answer you're getting right now. Diane turned her face away. When Cole rose to leave, Diane's hands suddenly tightened on the edge of the table. Detective, Diane called after him, her voice lower than before. He turned. Diane kept both hands on the table. When you find whoever killed him, don't assume they hated Walter. Cole paused at the top of the stairs. Why? Her fingernails pressed into the veneer. Because some of the people he hurt still loved him. Cole did not ask whom she meant. The way Diane avoided his eyes showed she was not ready to answer, and the tremor in her fingers showed the statement had not been casual. In the hallway, he stopped beside a bulletin board. Another copy of the old article hung there, yellowed with age. Someone had drawn a black circle around Walter's hand on Diane's shoulder and written 2 small words in the margin. This isn't forgiveness. Chapter 4. The Man Who Bought a Gun. Frank Delaney repaired furnaces, electronic locks, and alarm systems for nearly half the businesses in Bellwether. His office occupied the back of an old garage on County Road, where coils of copper wire hung in neat circles on the wall, and every box of screws bore a label in block capitals. People who lived with chaos often arranged their work too carefully. Cole noticed it the moment he stepped inside. Frank stood beside the desk, his forearms tanned, his body leaner than it appeared in his driver's license photograph. He wore a work jacket stained with oil at the elbows, but his boots had been wiped clean. On the shelf behind him was a photograph of a 19-year-old girl sitting on the hood of a pickup truck, windblown hair covering half her face. The frame angled slightly toward Frank's chair, as though he needed to see her whenever he looked up. Ava, Cole asked, looking at the photograph. Frank did not turn toward it. My daughter. She died 2 years ago, Cole said, keeping his attention on the frame instead of Frank. Frank's voice hardened. I know when my child died. He did not raise his voice, but every word landed straight and heavy. Frank pulled out a chair for Shaw and remained standing. Cole noticed a new callus along Frank's right index finger, in the place that often thickened on people who had recently begun practicing with a firearm. You bought a Ruger .22 6 weeks ago, Cole said. Yes, Frank replied, one hand still resting on the chair back. Cole placed a copy of the purchase form on the desk. Why? Target shooting. Frank looked at the paper but did not touch it. Cole's gaze moved to the fresh callus on his trigger finger. You shoot before that? No, Frank folded the hand closed. Then why start? Cole pressed, not allowing the clipped answer to create an exit. Frank met his eyes. I have the right to buy a gun. No one said you didn't. Cole laid the receipt beside the form. But Walter Graves was killed with a .22, and traffic cameras caught your truck passing Ash Street on 3 nights during the week before the murder, all after 11. Frank looked down at the receipt. A cord tightened briefly along his neck, then disappeared. I work late, Frank said, glancing past Cole toward the garage door. Where? Cole asked at once. Customers. Frank kept his eyes down. Cole pushed a pen and a blank sheet of paper toward him. Give me the names. I don't remember. Frank left the pen untouched. Shaw leaned back in her chair. You label every box of screws by size, but you don't remember who you worked for 3 nights in a row. I drive when I can't sleep, Frank said, glancing at her before returning his attention to the desk. And every drive takes you past the pharmacy? Cole asked. Irritation returned to Frank's face, just enough to cover the hesitation beneath it. Bellwether has 4 main streets. Cole gestured toward the sample security cameras mounted on the garage wall. You installed Walter's system. 4 years ago, Frank replied, still terse. Do you still have administrator access? Cole asked, placing a photograph of the server log beside the gun receipt. No, Frank answered before Cole's hand had fully left the photograph. Too fast. Cole took a screenshot from the file. A technical account under the name Fidelity had logged into the server remotely at 1:17 a.m., more than an hour after Walter's estimated time of death. Nothing had been deleted at that moment, but the user had opened the folder containing the previous night's recordings. Frank studied the image. He did not look surprised. Only his hand tightened on the chair back. Anyone else know the password? Cole asked. Maybe Walter, Frank said, flicking his eyes toward the login record. Cole set one finger beside the timestamp. Walter was dead. Then you have your answer, Frank shot back, leaning against the edge of the desk. Cole let the silence stretch. He had met liars who buried questions under extra detail, filling every gap no one had asked them to fill. Frank did the opposite. He cut each answer at the shortest possible point, as though any unnecessary word might drag something hidden into the open. Where is the gun? Cole asked. In here. Frank walked to a steel cabinet and took a key from his jacket pocket. The Ruger sat in a plastic case with the action open and the magazine stored separately. 2 ammunition boxes lay beside it, one short 17 rounds. Frank handed over the entire case without protest. If it was the murder weapon, he had kept it clean with almost insulting confidence. We'll test it, Cole said, accepting the case with gloved hands. Go ahead. Frank dropped the cabinet key onto the desk. Cole looked at Frank, then at the empty chair beside him. Do you want a lawyer? Not yet, Frank said, looking at the chair as though only now considering the possibility. Cole changed direction without warning. What did Walter do to Ava? For the first time, Frank lost control. Not with a shout. He stepped back half a pace and struck the shelving, knocking a box of glass fuses to the floor. The lid sprang open and the cylinders rolled around his boots. Don't use my daughter's name as bait, Frank said. Cole did not retreat. Then give me a reason not to. Frank crouched to gather the fuses. Twice his fingers failed to close properly around them. Ava had leukemia. Walter helped pay for the drugs. That's all. Medication from Graves' pharmacy? Cole asked, keeping his eyes on him. Frank looked up. Are you investigating his death or my daughter's? They may be the same case, Cole said, meeting the anger now visible in Frank's face. For several seconds, neither man spoke. The air compressor outside the office kicked on, grinding harshly before falling silent. Frank placed the last fuses back in the box, but left the lid open. Ava died from an infection, Frank said, his gaze moving to the photograph. The doctor said her body had nothing left to fight with. Do you believe that? Cole asked after the compressor stopped. Frank kept looking at the picture. I believe what they wrote on the death certificate. The answer was too carefully prepared. When Cole and Shaw returned to their car, Shaw opened a message from the laboratory. The Ruger hasn't been fired in at least several weeks. The barrel is clean, but there are no recent cleaning marks. The bullet from the scene is deformed, so they can't compare the rifling yet. Not cleared, Cole said, fastening his seat belt while watching the garage through the windshield. Shaw locked her phone. You think Frank killed Walter? Frank remained in the garage doorway, one hand on the frame, not watching them. I think he was preparing to do something, Cole answered. But you're not sure he did it, Shaw said, checking the garage in the rearview mirror. No, Cole replied after a beat. On the drive back, Cole called the hospital where Ava had been treated. Her records required a warrant, but an archive clerk confirmed one detail. During the final month of her life, Ava's immune support medication had been supplied by the Graves Foundation, not the hospital pharmacy. Cole ended the call. Ahead of him, the steeple of First Methodist rose at the end of the street. The flag outside Town Hall still flew at half-staff. A town could mourn a man with complete sincerity and still have no idea what he had sold it. Chapter 5. The Notebook in the Safe. Walter's safe was not hidden behind a painting in his office. It was set into the stockroom floor beneath a rubber mat whose edge had been trimmed with remarkable precision. Cole found it only because a technician measured the floor thickness and detected a square cavity underneath. Dunham was present when they opened it. He stood outside the evidence boundary with his arms folded. Walter had oxycodone stolen once, the chief explained. Maybe he kept a private inventory ledger. There was no oxycodone inside. The safe contained 3 envelopes of cash, a hard drive, 2 sets of patient records without identification numbers, and a brown leather notebook nearly 300 pages thick. There was no name on the cover. The pages were packed with small, even handwriting and almost no corrections. Cole put on gloves and opened it near the middle. April 14th. Emma went quiet again when I asked her. Other people always misunderstand the girl's silence. It is not fear. It is Emma's way of testing whether I am patient enough to wait for her to tell the truth. Cole stopped reading. Which Emma? Shaw asked. Dunham did not answer. Cole turned several more pages. Entries about Emma appeared weeks apart at first, then more often during the last 2 years. Walter wrote about her grades, the way she stood outside the pharmacy after school, and her need for a man who would not leave. Some passages sounded like the self-praise of a generous mentor. Others changed the air in the stockroom. Emma said her mother does not understand the closeness between us. I told her adults often put ugly names on what they cannot control. On the following page, I should not have lost my temper when she avoided me. The cruelty of youth is that they do not understand gratitude is also a responsibility. Dunham moved one step closer. Let me see that. Cole closed the notebook. No. This is someone from my town, Dunham said, staring at the leather cover. This is evidence in my case, Cole replied, holding the notebook against his chest. Dunham looked from the notebook to Cole. What are you thinking? I'm thinking you know the name Emma, Cole said, refusing the question he had been given. Dunham folded his arms more tightly. I know hundreds of people named Emma. But you didn't ask which Emma, Cole said, watching the hesitation pass briefly over the chief's face. Dunham's jaw tightened again. This time, he turned away before the reaction disappeared. On the first page, Walter had written an undated sentence. I have always tried to save everyone. I simply cannot save them all. Cole read it in the evidence room that night. At first, the words sounded like the confession of a man exhausted by generosity, but the more Cole read, the more he understood that Walter did not use the word save the way other people did. Walter saved Diane from prison, then kept her inside the story of his own mercy. Walter saved Ava with cheap medication, yet never once wrote that the drugs had been properly verified. Walter saved Emma from an absent father, then described every act of resistance as proof that she needed him more. There was not one line of remorse. There was self-pity. There was anger whenever the people he helped failed to show gratitude in the correct way. There were long passages in which Walter wondered why good men must always suffer the suspicion of those they save. But he never questioned whether what he had done was saving at all. The frightening part was not that Walter lied in his journal. He believed every word. Cole found Emma's full name in an entry dated September 3rd. Emma Price, 17, a senior at Bellwether High. Walter wrote that she had failed to appear for a summer scholarship ceremony and was being agitated by her mother. The next sentence had been crossed out once, but remained legible. Nora tried to turn a private moment into an accusation. Nora Price. Cole entered the name into the local record system. There was no case, no investigation report, only a call to the police station 2 years earlier, classified as family dispute. No action. The officer who had received it was Chief Ray Dunham. Cole called Shaw close to midnight. Tomorrow, get a warrant for every internal Bellwether police record from September 2 years ago, Cole said into the phone. Paper rustled at the other end before Shaw asked, "What did you find?" "A report that became a phone call," Cole answered, staring at the classification on his screen. "Could be a data entry error," Shaw said after several seconds. "Could be." Cole looked at the open notebook, but Walter wrote about it as something that had been handled. After the call, he turned to the final pages. The last entry had been written on the afternoon before Walter died. "Emma has returned to town. I knew she would come back. People always return to the only place that ever truly saw them." Below it, Walter had added another sentence in darker ink, pressing the pen hard enough to score the paper. "I must help her understand that what happened between us is not what she has chosen to call it." Cole sat for a long time without turning the page. Beside him were the scene photographs, the cup marked with lip balm, the small shoe print outside the rear door, the note hidden behind the frame. Details that had once seemed separate were beginning to point toward the same person, but none of them yet justified bringing her into an interrogation room. He had seen this happen before. A name entered a case file and began pulling every other fact toward itself. If a detective was careless, the name became a conclusion before the evidence arrived. Cole closed the notebook. He would not arrest Emma Price merely because Walter Graves had written about her. But for the first time since coming to Bellwether, he was no longer asking who would want to kill the best man in town. He was asking what Walter had done to make a 17-year-old believe he would never stop. Chapter 6. For people died. The hard drive in Walter's safe contained 2 accounting systems. The first matched the tax records, supplier invoices, and financial reports of the Graves Foundation. The second had been encrypted with a password so simple it felt arrogant: Savethemol. Inside was a list of drug shipments that had never passed through a licensed distribution chain. The product labels carried the names of legitimate pharmaceutical companies, but the lot numbers either did not exist or belonged to different medications. Some shipments came from overseas brokers. Others passed through 3 layers of shell companies. Walter sold most of them below market price and dispensed many at no charge. "Counterfeit drugs," Shaw said. Dr. Lal Benton, the state pharmaceutical specialist, shook his head. "Some are definitely counterfeit. Some contain the right active ingredient at the wrong dosage. Some may only be products manufactured for another market. The problem is that Walter didn't know which was which, and he gave them to patients anyway." A spreadsheet on the monitor listed more than 600 names. Beside each one were a diagnosis code, market price, Walter's purchase cost, and the amount the foundation had saved. 4 rows in the final column were highlighted red. Ava Delaney, 19. Martin Cho, 68. Rosa Bell, 43. Caleb Green, 8. All 4 had died within 10 days of taking medication from lots that had later been flagged. "When did Walter know?" Cole asked, looking at the last child's name. Benton opened an email. The broker sent a recall notice after the second death. Walter replied that stopping distribution would harm more people. Cole kept his eyes on the 4 red lines. Exact words. Benton scrolled down. If we withdraw the entire supply, more than 100 patients will have no alternative. For adverse outcomes cannot erase the demonstrated benefit to the many. Shaw finished reading and swore under her breath. Cole said nothing. He checked the timestamp. Walter had sent the email at 2:13 a.m., 6 days after Ava Delaney died. The next morning, he had told a fundraising audience that no patient in Bellwether should ever have to choose between rent and medicine. In Walter's mind, both statements could be true. They spent 3 days interviewing families. Martin Cho had complained that the new medication made him dizzy, but Walter told him the reaction was normal. Rosa Bell was hospitalized with liver damage. The pharmacy record had been altered to show a different lot number. Caleb Green's mother still kept the medication box in her freezer because she did not know what else to do with the last thing her son had swallowed. Frank Delaney did not open his door when Cole returned to the garage. Through it, he said his attorney had instructed him not to speak again. Cole slid a search warrant beneath the door. 2 hours later, police found a file in Frank's desk containing information about all 4 deaths, a printed copy of the recall email, and photographs of Walter leaving the pharmacy on different nights. There was no suicide note. There was no second gun. But on a map of Bellwether pinned behind a cabinet, Frank had marked 3 places from which someone could watch the pharmacy's rear entrance without appearing on municipal cameras. A red X sat exactly where his truck appeared in the traffic footage. He was watching Walter, Shaw said, and studying the cameras. Cole pointed to the 3 marked locations. Shaw closed the scene photo folder. Enough to arrest him? Enough to hold him, Cole answered, pulling the map closer. Frank was brought to the state police office at 6 that evening. His attorney sat beside him and repeatedly instructed him to answer only yes or no. Frank complied until Cole placed Ava's photograph on the table beside the email Walter had sent after her death. He knew, Cole said. Frank looked at the email. A muscle in his left cheek began to jump. Walter knew there was a problem with the lot. Cole continued, pushing the recall notice toward him. He kept giving it out. Frank's attorney touched his arm. Do not answer. Cole laid the marked map in front of them. You watched him. You bought a gun. Your account accessed the camera server after the murder. If there is any explanation other than you shooting Walter Graves, now is the time to give it. Frank kept staring at his daughter's picture. He came to the funeral. Frank, the lawyer warned, turning toward him. Walter sat in the front row. Frank continued, his voice growing hoarse. He hugged me. Said Ava had fought bravely. Did you kill him? Cole asked. Frank raised his eyes. No. Did you want to? Cole asked, keeping his attention on Frank rather than the lawyer. My client will not answer that, the attorney said at once. But Frank was already looking at Cole, and there was no outrage in his expression, none of the injured disbelief of a man falsely accused. There was only the exhaustion of someone who had just heard another person name the thing he had hidden. I didn't shoot him, Frank repeated. Cole believed that statement more than he wanted to. The ballistics report arrived the next morning. The bullet removed from Walter's body was too deformed for a complete match, but its rifling was inconsistent with Frank's Ruger. Tests found no gunshot residue in Frank's clothing or truck. Traffic footage showed his vehicle leaving the area at 11:46 p.m. inside the missing interval, but did not prove that he entered the pharmacy. The prime suspect had not been cleared. He had merely become more complicated. That same morning, Benton called Cole back to the laboratory. Walter's hard drive contained a folder labeled Triage. It did not hold medication records. It held private notes about people who had opposed Walter, including Diane, Frank, Nora Price, and 3 medical employees. Beside each name, Walter had assessed the threat that person posed to the Foundation. Nora Price's entry was marked, resolved through Ray. Cole read the line once, then printed it. It was time to ask Chief Dunham what, exactly, he had resolved. Chapter 7. The Complaint That Did Not Exist. Ray Dunham did not ask for a lawyer. He invited Cole into his office, closed the door, and poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot burned black at the bottom. On the filing cabinet behind the desk stood a photograph of a curly-haired girl smiling beside a small birthday cake, while a 4-line ran into her arm. The hospital bracelet beneath the frame read Maya Dunham. Your granddaughter? Cole asked. 11 years old, Dunham said, placing a cup in front of him. Autoimmune vasculitis. Infusions every 6 weeks. The Graves Clinic pays for them? Cole asked, glancing at Maya's photograph. The part insurance won't cover, Dunham replied after setting down the coffee. Cole took the printout from the triage folder and laid it on the desk. Dunham read the words resolved through Ray. He did not ask where the document had come from. Nora Price came to see you on September 8th 2 years ago, Cole said. She told you Walter was touching her daughter, sending private messages, and keeping Emma at the pharmacy after closing. The call was classified as a family dispute. There was no forensic interview, no referral to Child Protective Services, and no seizure of the phone. Dunham lifted his cup, but did not drink. Nora didn't want Emma questioned. She wanted Walter investigated. Cole placed one finger on the false classification. She wanted me to arrest him that night, Dunham said, both hands wrapped around the cold cup. Did you question Emma? Cole asked, looking directly at him. Yes, Dunham answered, his gaze resting on a coffee stain on the desk. Where? Cole continued. In the public interview room. Dunham glanced toward the closed office door. Was a child interview specialist present? Cole leaned forward. No, Dunham said more quietly. Was her mother there? Cole asked before he could stop. Dunham nodded once. Yes. Cole slowed the next question. Was Walter there? Dunham looked at him. He arrived later. Cole let 2 seconds pass. You put the accused man in the same room with the child? Nora started shouting. Emma wouldn't speak. Walter said it was all a misunderstanding. Dunham stared down at the cooled coffee. And you believed Walter? Cole said. I believed what I saw. Dunham's voice hardened. You saw a girl go silent in front of the man her mother was accusing, Cole said, holding the image in place. You've never run a town like this, Dunham replied, drawing the cup closer without drinking. Don't turn the question into a lecture. Cole kept one hand on the file. No, you need to hear this. Dunham still spoke softly, but his fingers closed around the cup. 2 years ago, the clinic was 3 weeks from shutting down. Walter's foundation paid the electric bill, bought the drugs, and covered the salaries of 2 nurses. If I had put him in handcuffs in front of the town based on an allegation no one had confirmed, donors would have pulled out. The board would have panicked. The clinic would have closed before we even knew whether the accusation was true. That isn't a reason not to investigate, Cole said, his voice low but unyielding. No, Dunham nodded. It is the reason I used to give myself permission not to investigate. Cole had not expected the admission to come so quickly. He had prepared for denial, anger, and blame. Dunham gave him none of them. Instead, the chief pulled Maya's photograph closer and placed one finger against the edge of the frame. She had already lost 2 toes before Walter brought a specialist here, Dunham said. If the clinic closed, my brother would have had to sell his house to take her to Pittsburgh. It still might not have been enough. I looked at Nora Price, then I looked at my granddaughter, and I chose the thing I could see. You chose Walter, Cole said, refusing to let Dunham rename the decision. I chose Maya. Dunham looked directly at him for the first time since placing the photograph between them. Emma paid for it, Cole said, glancing at Maya's picture. Dunham closed his eyes for an instant. I know. No. You know now. Cole leaned forward. Back then, you chose not to know. Dunham did not answer. In the hallway, a desk phone rang twice and stopped. Someone walked past the door, footsteps slowing for a moment before continuing. Cole took out Walter's note about Nora. He knew you had buried the complaint. I told him to stay away from the Price family, Dunham said, rubbing one thumb along the cup handle. He wrote that it had been resolved through you. Cole pushed the triage page closer. Walter interpreted everything in whatever way served him, Dunham said with a small shake of his head. But you gave him a reason to. Cole tapped the printed words. Dunham looked straight at him. What do you want me to say? That I'm ashamed? I am. That I deserve to lose the badge? Maybe. But if you ask whether I could go back to that night, watch Maya lose her treatment, and follow procedure anyway, I don't know the answer. Cole wanted to say the law did not permit one child to be weighed against another. The sentence was ready in his mind, sharp and correct. Then his gaze settled on Maya's photograph, on the 4 tape decorated with stars, and the words did not come out. He hated his own silence. "There," Dunham said when he noticed. "Now you've seen the calculation." "Seeing it doesn't mean accepting it," Cole replied, standing still rather than taking the escape Dunham had offered. "No." Dunham let out a slow breath and looked back at the photograph. "But it makes judgment less clean." Cole stood. "I need the complete original file, including personal notes and call logs." "You'll have it," Dunham said slowly. "You're transferring command to your deputy until the internal investigation is over." Cole tucked the file beneath his arm. Dunham nodded as though he had expected that sentence from the moment Cole entered. "And the clinic?" "That isn't part of this decision yet," Cole said, resting a hand on the doorknob. "It will be," Dunham replied, watching him. Cole started to open the door. "Detective," Dunham called. Cole turned. "If you release everything now, the Foundation's accounts will be frozen. The clinic may not be able to pay for next month's infusions." Dunham looked at his granddaughter's picture. "I'm not asking you to hide it. I only want you to know that the first person to pay won't be me." "The first person already paid 2 years ago," Cole said as he opened the door. He stepped into the hallway, but the words did not make him feel as though he had won. Chapter 8. The Missing 11 Minutes. The felony account had done more than open the camera folder after Walter's death. A forensic technician recovered part of a deletion command that had been overwritten. It had been executed from Frank's laptop at 1:23 a.m. and had targeted the exact 11-minute gap. Cole carried the report into the interview room. Frank sat beside his lawyer, but this time he was not staring down at the table. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, his beard uneven, and his shirt collar had been buttoned wrong. The orderly man from the garage was gone. "You deleted the footage?" Cole said. "Yes," Frank answered immediately. The lawyer snapped his head around. "Frank, we agreed. Not necessary anymore." Frank kept his eyes on Cole. "I deleted it." Cole placed the recovered data between them. "What was in the recording?" "My truck," Frank said, looking at the time code. "What else?" Cole asked, refusing to let the answer stop there. "I don't know," Frank replied, his lips barely moving. Cole arranged the surveillance map, the gun receipt, and a sealed letter in a straight line before him. "I think you went there to kill Walter." Frank said nothing. "You watched the entrances, bought a gun in the same caliber, and studied the blind spots," Cole continued. "You planned to shoot him and then kill yourself." "That is speculation," the lawyer said. Cole removed a sheet of paper from an evidence sleeve. "We found this in a hollow compartment beneath the seat of your truck." The handwriting in the suicide letter shook near the final lines. Frank had written that no one else was responsible, that Ava deserved a father who did more than stand by, and that Walter would keep saving people until more families had to bury their children. He told his sister to sell the garage and use the proceeds to pay the remaining hospital debt. Frank stared at the letter for a long time. "Did you bring the gun to the pharmacy?" Cole asked. "Yes," Frank answered, still looking at his own suicide note. "Did you go inside?" Cole kept his eyes on him. "No," Frank shook his head. "Why not?" Cole asked, his voice unchanged. Frank raised both hands to his face, rubbed hard, and let them fall. "I parked behind a thrift store at 11:36. Sat in the truck 6 minutes. Maybe 7. I saw the rear door standing open. Diane says the lock sticks," Cole said, tapping the photograph of the door. "I know. I repaired it once." Frank swallowed. "I got out. The gun was in my coat. When I reached the door, I heard something. Not loud, like a metal box hitting the floor." "A gunshot?" Cole asked, tilting his head slightly. "With a suppressor, maybe. I don't know." Frank gripped both hands beneath the table edge. "What happened next?" Cole asked. "I waited." Frank stared at the wall behind Cole rather than at anyone in the room. "Someone came out. Put up. Small. I didn't see the face. They ran toward Maple." "Male or female?" Cole asked quickly. "I don't know," Frank said, still watching the wall. "Young or old?" Cole changed the question. "Young," Frank answered after swallowing again. "Did you follow?" Cole asked, putting both elbows on the table. "No," Frank gave a slight shake of his head. "Did you enter the pharmacy?" Cole continued. "Yes." Frank nodded. "Walter was on the office floor. I checked for a pulse. He was dead." "What did you touch?" Cole asked, looking at Frank's hands on his knees. Frank opened and closed his fingers as though remembering each surface. His wrist, the edge of the desk, maybe the door. Why didn't you call the police? Cole asked, keeping his voice level. Frank gave one brief, dry laugh with no humor in it. Because I had a gun in my pocket, a suicide letter in the truck, and photographs of him covering the garage wall. That explains protecting yourself, Cole said, not letting the laugh stand in for an answer. At first, Frank pulled his chair closer to the table. Then I looked at him. I had stood outside that door for 6 minutes because I didn't have the courage to go in. Someone else did it before I could. I didn't know who they were, but I knew why a person might want to. You couldn't know the motive, Cole said with a slight shake of his head. I didn't need to, Frank replied, looking directly at him. So you logged into the system and deleted the clip showing your truck. Cole touched one finger to the deletion record. Yes, Frank answered without evasion. That clip might have shown the killer. Cole pushed the image of the missing time toward him. The exterior camera only covered the parking lot. The person stayed against the wall, outside the frame. It showed only my truck. Frank shook his head. You couldn't be sure, Cole said, holding the print beneath the interrogation room light. I watched it before I deleted it, Frank replied, leaning forward, his voice rougher now. You destroyed evidence in a murder investigation to protect someone you didn't know. Cole placed both hands on the table. I protected the person who did what I had intended to do. Frank met his eyes. That doesn't make you a good man, Cole said after holding the look. I know. Frank lowered his gaze to the suicide note. The answer stopped Cole for a moment. In his journal, Walter always found a way to keep himself in the position of rescuer. Frank did not. He did not ask to be understood, and he did not deny the crime of destroying evidence. That difference did not make his actions less illegal, but it made it harder for Cole to keep him inside the simple shape of a liar. Did you recognize the person as Emma Price? Cole asked. Frank frowned. I don't know her. Ever seen this picture? Cole asked, sliding Emma's school photograph closer. Maybe in the school paper. Frank looked at it without any clear recognition. He studied the photograph for several seconds, then shook his head. I didn't see the face. Did you want that person to get away? Cole asked, drawing the photograph back half an inch. Frank inhaled slowly. I wanted Walter unable to hurt anyone else. Those two things are not exactly the same. But you chose as though they were, Cole said. Frank did not argue. After the interview, the prosecutor authorized Frank's detention for obstruction of justice and destruction of evidence. When the handcuffs closed around his wrists, Frank looked at Cole as though he wanted to say something. In the end, he did. Do you have children? Frank asked, staring at the newly locked cuffs. No, Cole answered without adding weight to the word. Then you'll think I'm a terrible father. Frank gave a faint, bitter smile, his eyes still on his wrists. I think you chose too late, Cole said, shaking his head. So do I, Frank replied, looking down at his hands. Chapter 9. The People Who Saw. Nurse Marlene Webb had worked at Gray's Community Clinic for nearly 7 years. When Cole arrived, she was packing patient files into cardboard boxes because the Foundation Board had suspended operations after news of the unverified medication leaked. Strips of packing tape crossed the Walter Graves Foundation logo, covering the smiling face printed in the corner of every box. Marlene was 52 and spoke so softly that a listener had to lean closer. She remembered Emma, not because of the medical record, but because the girl always chose the chair nearest the door and never sat with her back to the hallway. Emma came in with stomach pain 2 years ago, Marlene said. Nora was with her. Emma wouldn't let me touch her. Were there signs of abuse? Cole asked, looking at the chair she had described. There were bruises around her wrists, a small split in her lip. She said she had fallen. Marlene stared at the boxes. Did you believe her? Cole asked, lowering his voice. Not completely, Marlene admitted, both hands resting on the roll of packing tape. Did you make the mandatory report? Cole asked without looking away. Marlene's hand stopped midway through pulling the tape. I told the supervising physician. What did the doctor say? Cole asked, his attention still on her hands. That there wasn't enough evidence. Marlene drew out another length of tape before answering. And you stopped. Cole watched the tape stretched between her hands. Marlene pulled hard enough to tear it. The clinic was cutting staff. Walter had just learned that an employee leaked patient information. He said anyone who created another scandal would be responsible if the clinic closed. "Did Walter know you were concerned about Emma?" Cole asked across the stacked boxes. He asked what I had seen. Marlene lowered her head toward the file box. "And you told him?" Cole asked at once. "Yes." Marlene closed her eyes for a moment. "What happened after that?" Cole continued. "He said Emma had family problems, that she sometimes hurt herself for attention." Marlene bent to pick up the torn end of tape. "He said he was trying to help." The sentence returned in Cole's mind. "I have always tried to save everyone." "Did you believe him?" Cole asked as the tape stuck to the cardboard. Marlene took nearly 10 seconds to answer. "I needed to. It was the most honest thing," she said. Diane Marsh returned briefly to the suspect list when the partial print on Walter's drawer matched her. She had a key, a grievance, and no certainty that she had locked the back door. Lily's glucose monitor proved Diane was home at 11:43 p.m., but it did not prove she had not left earlier. Cole requested searches of her car and apartment. Diane agreed after swearing at him for 3 straight minutes without repeating herself once. They found no gun, gloves, or blood. But in the pocket of Diane's coat was a handwritten copy of Walter's work schedule with one line beneath it. "Thursday, alone late." "Were you watching him?" Cole asked. "I planned to take my file," Diane said, folding her arms. "What file?" Cole pointed to the schedule note. "Photographs, articles, media consent forms. Walter wouldn't give me copies." Diane pointed at the note inside the evidence sleeve. "Did you go to the pharmacy that night?" Cole asked. "No." Lily's blood sugar crashed at 10:50. Diane folded her arms more tightly. "Did you leave the rear door unlocked?" Cole looked directly at her. "Maybe." Diane lowered her eyes. "Maybe or yes?" Cole refused the vagueness. "I remember pulling the door. I don't remember hearing the latch." Diane looked down at her shoes. "Did you tell anyone Walter would be alone?" Cole asked. "No," Diane answered at once. Then her mouth stopped, as though another memory had surfaced. Slowly, she raised her head. "Emma asked once." The room fell quiet. "When?" Cole asked. "About a month ago. She came to the pharmacy looking for Walter. I told her he usually stayed late on Thursdays." Diane looked down at her hands. "Did you know what was happening between them?" Cole asked, watching her face change. "I knew he looked at her the way he looked at people who were about to become part of his story." Diane rubbed her palms together. "I asked Emma if she needed help. She said no." "Did you tell anyone?" Cole asked more slowly. Diane gave a bitter laugh. "Tell who?" "Dunno. Anyone," Cole said, his voice quiet. "I thought if I pushed her, she wouldn't come back." Diane pressed both hands against her thighs to keep them still. "And you let her leave?" Cole said without softening the question. "Yes." Diane looked at him. "You're collecting the moments when none of us did anything, aren't you?" Cole did not deny it. The list grew longer every day. A school counselor had noticed that Emma missed classes after volunteering at the pharmacy, but Walter was the school's largest donor. The family doctor wrote adolescent stress, even after Nora asked to have Emma examined alone. A neighbor heard Nora and Walter arguing outside the Price home, but did not call police because he didn't want to interfere in family business. Each person had a reason just sufficient to continue living with themselves. No one planned Walter's death. No one helped Emma prepare the gun, choose the hour, or clean the scene. But around her stood a circle of adults, each of whom had seen one small piece and put it down because holding it any longer would have required action. Cole found Emma at the public library on Friday afternoon. She sat at the last table with college preparation books and a plastic cup of water in front of her. Her brown hair fell to her shoulders, and she wore a gray hoodie. She was small enough that the shoe print outside the rear door suddenly carried a different weight. When Cole approached, Emma looked up. Her eyes did not ask who he was. They showed only that she had known this day would come. Chapter 10. Emma Price. Cole did not handcuff Emma in the library. He told her to call her mother, then took her to the station with a court-appointed juvenile attorney. Nora Price arrived 15 minutes later, her hair still wet from leaving a shift at the laundromat. her face bloodless when she saw her daughter through the interview room glass. Emma sat upright with both hands resting on her thighs. She did not ask whether she was under arrest. When the attorney explained her right to remain silent, Emma listened to the end, nodded, and said she wanted to answer questions. The attorney rested one hand on the rights form. "You can stop at any time." "I know," Emma said, nodding without lifting her eyes from the table. Cole placed a photograph of Walter in front of her. It was not a crime scene picture, but a newspaper image of him presenting 14-year-old Emma with a scholarship. Walter smiled toward the camera. Emma stared down at the oversized ceremonial check, her shoulders drawn high as though she were trying to shrink away from the hand against her back. "Did you go to the pharmacy the night Walter died?" Cole asked. "Yes," Emma answered immediately, never looking toward her mother behind the glass. The attorney leaned closer. "Emma, you don't have to. I want to tell them." Emma kept her eyes on the photograph. "I went there." "Which entrance did you use?" Cole asked, holding his voice level. "The back door," Emma replied while looking at Walter's picture. "Was it locked?" Cole continued. "No," Emma gave a small shake of her head. Cole kept both hands well away from the files. "Did you bring a gun?" "Yes." Emma curled one thumb into her palm. Behind the glass, Nora made a strangled sound. Cole did not turn. "Where did you get it?" Cole asked across the space between the two file folders. "From my grandfather's trunk." Emma tightened both hands against her thighs. "Mom didn't know it was still there." "Did you test it first?" Cole asked, slowing the question by one beat. "I watched instruction videos." Emma spoke evenly, as though reciting a list she had memorized. "I fired it once by the river." Cole looked at the photograph of burned fabric recovered from the floor. "Did you buy a suppressor?" "No," Emma shook her head. "I wrapped a towel around the barrel." It didn't reduce the sound as much as people online said it would. That detail matched the scorched fibers found beneath the desk. It was not a sophisticated method. It was only a girl who had researched enough to believe she could control the sound of a gunshot. "Did Walter know you were coming?" Cole asked, closing the crime scene photograph folder. "I texted him and said I wanted to talk." Emma ran her little finger along the seam of her pants. "About what?" Cole asked. Emma raised her eyes for the first time. "I told him I would withdraw the accusation if he left my mother alone." "What was Walter doing to her?" Cole asked, keeping his voice at the same measured level. "He called our landlord and said my mother was unstable. He called the school and said I had mental health problems. He mailed letters to me every week." Emma blinked slowly but did not cry. "He didn't have to touch me anymore. He only had to make everyone believe that anything I said was part of an illness." Cole opened the journal and placed it in front of her. Emma looked at the leather cover but did not reach for it. "He wrote that you loved him," Cole said, opening to the marked page. "I know," Emma replied, leaving the notebook untouched. "You read it?" Cole asked, watching the slightest movement in her face. "He read part of it to me once." Emma fixed her gaze on a point along the table edge. "He said I would understand when I was older." Cole turned the journal face down. "What happened that night?" Emma drew a breath. Her breathing remained even, but the little finger of her left hand began twitching against the seam of her pants. "He opened the door," Emma began, staring at one point on the tabletop. "I put my cup of water on the desk. I told him I wanted him to sign a letter admitting that he had lied about my mother. He laughed." "What kind of laugh?" Cole asked, not interrupting the memory with an interpretation. "The way adults laugh when they see a child wearing their clothes." Emma looked down at her hands. "He told me I didn't understand what I was doing. He said I had come back because I still needed him. Then he stood up." "Did he attack you?" Cole asked, keeping every word at the same height. "He touched my hair," Emma answered, looking down at both hands. Cole paused for a fraction of a second. "Only that." The attorney gave Cole a warning look, but Emma had already raised her head. "It didn't need to be more," Emma answered before the attorney could intervene. "I had decided before I came." The room became so quiet that the air conditioning sounded like wind moving through a tunnel. "Did you shoot him while his back was turned?" Cole asked. "When he bent down to pick up the letter," Emma replied, her voice flat. "You cleaned the scene afterward." Cole looked at the photograph of the wipe marks on the desk. "I brought gloves," Emma said, recounting the movements with her eyes still on the picture. I wiped the cup, the desk, and the door handles. I knocked over the paperclip box. Then I heard a vehicle in the alley, so I left. What did you take from the drawer? Cole asked. A stack of photographs, Emma answered. Photographs of whom? Cole kept his voice low. Me. Emma drew her knees closer together. Where are they? Cole asked. I burned them. Emma looked down again. Cole moved to the last piece of physical evidence. Where is the gun? Under a storm drain grate on Maple Street. Emma replied without hesitation. Cole knew the confession was now detailed enough to support the recovery warrant. Every element fit. There had been no sudden loss of control and no immediate act of self-defense. Emma had selected a night when Walter would be alone, learned the route inside, prepared the gun and gloves, brought the towel, and sent the message that ensured he would wait for her. Under the law, it was premeditated murder. Why didn't you leave? Cole asked. You and your mother could have left Bellwether. We tried. Emma looked through the glass at Nora. Somewhere else, Cole insisted, as though another address could change what had happened. He called somewhere else. Emma looked back at him. He had recommendation letters, doctors, the police chief, the school principal. I had a mother everyone said was paranoid. Cole heard the weakness in the sentence he was about to use, but he said it anyway. There were still legal options. Emma lifted her head, and for the first time a sharp edge entered her voice. Which ones? Cole opened his mouth, but Emma continued before he could offer another name. My mother reported him, Emma said, her words still quiet. The nurse saw. The school knew I was missing classes. Diane asked. Chief Dunham listened. Which one of the right people did you want me to try one more time? The attorney placed a hand on Emma's arm. The girl did not pull away, but she kept looking at Cole. You killed a person, Cole said. I know. Emma answered without breaking eye contact. What he did not give you the right to execute him. Cole pressed one palm against the file, needing a solid surface beneath his principal. I know the law says that. Emma replied, neither defiant nor pleading. What do you say? Cole asked after a silence. Emma waited several seconds. When she answered, her voice was slower and no longer rehearsed. If Walter had been your father, Emma asked, and your mother reported him, and no one believed her, and he could still find you anywhere, how long would you wait before doing something yourself? Cole did not answer. Emma watched his silence, then lowered her eyes to the photograph. I didn't know how long I was supposed to wait either, so I chose a day. Cole did not sleep that night. He lay in his motel room, listening to the ice machine in the corridor dump one load after another into its metal bin. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw his younger brother in a parking lot 13 years earlier, blood spreading through his shirt. The man who shot him had received a reduced charge in an earlier armed assault case after agreeing to testify. He served 4 years of a 6-year sentence. 3 months after his release, he offended again. Cole had built his entire career on one conclusion. Mercy granted to an offender was always paid for by another victim. But near dawn, staring at the faded ceiling, he realized he no longer believed Walter Graves was the only victim who needed protection from mercy. Chapter 11. The Man Who Asked for Mercy. District Attorney Melissa Grant read Emma's confession twice before removing her glasses. 17 years old. She prepared the weapon, chose the time, lured the victim into staying, and cleaned the scene. That is first-degree murder if the jury accepts the confession. They will, Cole said from the chair opposite her desk. Grant placed her glasses beside the file. Then why are you here? To recommend a deal, Cole replied, looking directly at her. Grant stared as though she had misheard. From you. Cole knew his reputation. In earlier cases, he had opposed charge reductions when prosecutors believed a witness was weak or a jury might not sympathize with the victim. During one meeting, he had said plea bargains turned a family's suffering into an administrative cost. Second-degree murder, Cole said, sliding a written proposal toward Grant. 12 to 20 years. Or another structure that accounts for the abuse, the reporting failures, and the defendant's age. Grant tapped her pen against the line describing the moment of the shooting. She did not fire while she was being attacked. I know, Cole answered at once. There is no lawful self-defense claim. Grant turned to the legal summary. I know, Cole repeated. She planned it. Grant placed a finger on the sequence of weapon preparation and timing. I'm the one who proved that. Cole looked at his own signature beneath the report. Grant set down the pen. Then what is your reason? Cole pushed Walter's journal, Nora's complaint file, and Marlene's report across the desk. The system was warned. Repeatedly, Walter used his reputation, his money, and the institutions that depended on him to neutralize every response. Emma did not imagine that no one would protect her. No one protected her. That explains the crime, Grant said, pushing the files back half an inch. It does not erase it. I'm not asking you to erase it. Cole replied, leaving his hands where they were. You're asking me to reduce it. Grant lifted her eyes from the documents. Yes. Cole nodded. Grant leaned back. How did your brother die? The question struck before Cole could prepare. That isn't relevant. It is, Grant said calmly, refusing to let him leave his own history outside the room. You have used that story in every argument against plea agreements for the last 10 years. Cole looked down at the papers. For a moment, the office seemed to contract around him, fluorescent light flashing along the edge of Grant's glasses. The man who killed his brother had once stood before another prosecutor. Someone had examined the file, considered his violent childhood, his cooperation, the uncertainty of a trial, and proposed mercy. Cole had called that decision a betrayal. Now he had just done the same thing. He had acted before recognizing it. Grant saw the change in his face, but said nothing. She allowed him to finish the distance on his own. This case is different, Cole said, and heard the weakness in the sentence immediately. Every case is different to the person asking for the exception, Grant replied, leaning back and leaving the words between them. The man who killed my brother received a reduction in exchange for testimony in another case, Cole said, clenching his hands beneath the desk. He was never forced to face the full weight of what he had done. And Emma? Grant asked, pointing her pen toward the juvenile file. She faced it from the first minute. Cole looked at Emma Price printed on the cover. Is that a legal reason, or your reason? Grant asked, turning the pen once between her fingers. Both, Cole answered after a beat. Grant remained silent for a long time, then pulled the file toward herself. I'll make the offer. I'm not promising she will accept. Emma refused in less than a minute. The meeting took place in a counseling room at the Juvenile Detention Center. Nora sat beside her daughter with swollen eyes. The defense attorney explained that a plea agreement might allow Emma to leave prison while she was still young enough to begin again. Emma listened to the end, the same way she had listened to the warning about her right to remain silent. I won't take it, Emma said when the attorney finished. Nora gripped her daughter's hand. Emma, please. Mom. Emma squeezed Nora's cold fingers and spoke the single word softly. 12 years is still 12 years, but 25, 30, Nora could not finish. Her shoulders shook, and her hands were so cold that Emma enclosed them in both of hers. The attorney leaned forward. Trial carries an enormous risk. The state has your confession, the weapon, phone data, and proof of preparation. The circumstances will be presented, but there is no guarantee the jury will reduce the charge. I understand, Emma said, nodding to her attorney. Cole stood near the door. Why are you refusing? Emma looked at him. The detention center had issued her a pale blue sweatshirt with sleeves long enough to cover most of her hands. Without makeup or lip balm, she looked smaller than she had in the library. The deal closes the case, Emma said. People hear that I pleaded guilty, and then they stop listening. Walter's journal can still be investigated, Cole said, as though he also needed to hear the possibilities spoken aloud. Can be, Emma replied, letting the phrase remain in the room. Dunham is under investigation, Cole continued. Can be, Emma repeated, this time without looking away from him. Frank has already been charged with destroying evidence, Cole added, naming one consequence that was certain. And Walter will still be the good man who made a few mistakes. Emma drew one hand out of her sleeve. If we go to trial, the lawyers have to say what he did. Dunham has to answer. The nurse has to answer. The families who used those drugs have to answer. You could receive the maximum sentence. Cole looked at the oversized detention clothes on her body. I know, Emma folded her fingers back inside the sleeve. You do not have to sacrifice yourself to prove something, Cole said, lowering his voice. I'm not sacrificing myself. Emma shook her head. I killed him. I don't need them to forgive me. I need them to hear. Cole looked at her and understood that nothing in his professional vocabulary could change her decision. Emma did not want to become a perfect victim in order to earn sympathy, and she did not want to be recast as the hero who freed the town. She insisted on keeping both truths. Walter had harmed her, and she had deliberately prepared to kill him. No one else in the case had managed to do that with themselves. Grant called Cole while he was leaving the facility. There's a decision on the Dunham records, Grant said over the phone, paper turning at her end of the call. If we introduce the full file, we have to notify the Foundation Board and the State Health Agency. The assets could be frozen immediately. They have to be introduced, Cole answered before the calculation involving the clinic could alter his response. The clinic has 43 patients in continuous treatment, Grant said, turning the patient statistics toward herself. Cole stopped in the middle of the corridor. Through the window, Emma had bowed her head so Nora could stroke her hair. A detention officer waited outside the room. Give me until tomorrow morning, Cole said into the phone. He was not asking for time to decide whether to release the records. He was asking for time to look directly at the person who would pay for the decision. Chapter 12. No one wins. Cole met Dunham at the clinic at 6 in the morning. Most of the corridors were dark, and only the infusion unit remained lit. Maya slept in a reclining chair with a clear line running from her arm to a bag of medication on the stand above her. Dunham sat beside her holding an open comic book he was not reading. He did not look surprised to see Cole. Today is the last treatment the Foundation prepaid, Dunham said. Cole stopped outside the curtain line. Nora's complaint file will be entered into the case. I assumed it would. Dunham closed the comic book and looked at his granddaughter. The health agency will audit the clinic. The Foundation's accounts may be frozen. Cole looked toward the medication dripping behind the curtain. Not May. Dunham adjusted the edge of Maya's blanket. The board called me last night. If the records become public, 2 donors leave immediately. I could classify that part as supplemental material and refer it separately for internal investigation, Cole said, one hand resting on the curtain line without crossing it. It would still exist, but it might not be used at trial. Dunham turned to him. Are you offering me a choice? You can disclose it yourself today, together with a plan to move the patients into state programs. Cole kept his voice low enough not to wake Maya. Or I file it through procedure and let everything collapse within hours. That isn't a choice to keep quiet, Dunham said, closing the comic book on his knees. That choice no longer exists. Cole looked through the gap in the curtain at the 4 line in the child's arm. Dunham studied him for a long time. You considered it? Yes, Cole admitted. Why didn't you keep it? Dunham asked, his eyes still on Maya. Cole waited long enough to hear the infusion pump change rhythm before answering. Because I would be doing what you did. Choosing the person in front of me and making someone else pay where I couldn't see them. Maya shifted in her sleep. Dunham rested a hand on her shoulder until she settled again. I'll hold a press conference at 9, Dunham said, drawing his hand back and closing the comic book. I'll resign. I'll release the file and everything I failed to do. You don't have to resign before the investigation is finished, Cole said with a slight shake of his head. Yes, Dunham replied, looking at the badge on his belt. I do. What about Maya? Cole asked, looking at the clear tubing running from her arm. My brother called a hospital in Pittsburgh. Dunham smoothed the blanket over his granddaughter. We're selling our mother's house. Cole wanted to say he was sorry, but an apology from the man who had made the decision would sound like a way to lighten his own conscience. He only nodded. You did the right thing, Dunham said, pulling the curtain around the infusion chair. That doesn't mean no one gets hurt, Cole replied, looking at the strip of light left between the curtain edges. No, Dunham closed it until only a narrow seam remained. That's the part people leave out of speeches about doing the right thing. The trial began 4 months later. Outside the courthouse, 2 groups of protesters faced one another. One carried Walter's photograph and signs reading justice for the man who saved U.S. The other carried the names Emma, Ava, and Caleb beneath the word silence is also a choice. Police barriers stood between them. Diane Marsh walked past both groups without looking at either. Walter's journal was read to the jury on the 6th day. The prosecution used it to establish Emma's motive. The defense used the same pages to show how Walter had constructed a reality in which every act of resistance became evidence that he understood his victim better than she understood herself. "I have always tried to save everyone," the prosecutor read. A woman in the front row began to cry. The prosecutor lowered her eyes to the journal and completed the passage. "I simply cannot save them all." Frank sat in the gallery without handcuffs. He had pleaded guilty to destroying evidence and obstructing justice in exchange for 2 years of probation and community service. Whenever Ava's name was spoken, he lowered his head and gripped his knees. Frank's sentence was lawful, defensible, and far lighter than the punishment Emma faced. Marlene Webb testified that she had failed to report what she saw. Her nursing license had been suspended for 6 months. She cried while apologizing to Emma, but Emma did not look up. Diane testified that Walter had helped and humiliated her through the same act. When the defense asked whether he had been a bad man, Diane answered that the question was too easy for what had happened. Dunham took the stand on the 9th day. He wore civilian clothes. No badge, no gun. He described Nora, Emma, the public interview room, and the call he made to Walter. Then he told the court about Maya. "Did you choose your granddaughter?" the prosecutor asked, stepping closer to the witness stand. "I chose a child I loved over a child I was responsible for protecting," Dunham answered. The courtroom fell silent. "Did you believe Walter was innocent at the time?" the prosecutor asked after pausing before the stand. Dunham placed both hands on the rail. "I believe that if I did not investigate, I would not have to know whether he was guilty." It was the only answer that made Emma look up. Cole testified last. The defense attorney asked whether he believed the system had failed Emma. The prosecutor objected, and the judge allowed Cole to answer only within the scope of his investigation. "Yes," Cole said. "Which system?" the defense attorney asked, turning to the next question. "Law enforcement, healthcare, the school, the adults who noticed warning signs but separated each sign from all the others," Cole answered, looking across the jury. "Did that make Emma's killing of Walter lawful?" the attorney asked, glancing toward Emma. "No," Cole replied without changing his tone. "Did it make the killing understandable?" the attorney asked, moving half a step closer to the stand. "Yes." Cole looked at the jurors. "So both things can be true?" the attorney asked, leaving the two answers side by side. "Yes," Cole said, still facing the jury. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. They found Emma guilty of first-degree murder. At sentencing, the judge acknowledged the abuse, Emma's age, and the failures of the institutions around her, but said the court could not transform a planned killing into a lawful act merely because the victim had escaped accountability. Emma was sentenced to 25 years to life, with eligibility for review after 25 years. Nora folded over in her seat. Diane put both arms around her. Frank closed his eyes. Dunham stood motionless at the back of the courtroom. In the corridor, people began arguing before the judge had left the bench. Some said Walter had done terrible things, but still saved hundreds of people. Others said every good deed had been another instrument of control. Families whose relatives survived because of cheap medication brought his photographs to court. The families of the 4 who died brought death certificates. Neither side was lying completely. Emma was the only person who did not argue about who she was. As officers led her through the side door, Cole stood. Emma paused for 1 second, long enough for them to look at each other. "Now they've heard," Cole said. "Yes," Emma replied with a small nod. "Do you regret refusing the deal?" Cole asked, looking toward the door waiting to close behind her. Emma looked back into the courtroom, where voices were already rising in layers, each person holding one piece of Walter Graves and calling that piece the whole truth. "No," Emma said, looking toward the courtroom, "but I wish they had listened sooner." The door closed behind her. A year later, Graves Pharmacy was an empty storefront. The neon sign had been removed, leaving a clean rectangle on the brick wall. The clinic reopened under another name after 6 months, smaller than before and no longer able to provide free treatment to everyone. Maya Dunham moved to Pittsburgh. Her family sold the house, but maintained her infusion schedule. Dunham was not criminally charged because of the statute of limitations and insufficient evidence of intentional obstruction, but he never returned to law enforcement. The Walter Graves Foundation was dissolved. Part of its assets compensated families affected by the counterfeit medication. The rest disappeared into legal fees, tax debt, and contracts no one had examined carefully while Walter was alive. In the town square, Walter's bronze bust was removed after a close vote. The council did not destroy it. They stored it in the basement of Town Hall because no one could agree whether it should be preserved or discarded. On the empty pedestal, someone left a sheet of paper pinned beneath a stone. "I have always tried to save everyone." By the next morning, someone else had written beneath it, "Who asked you to save them?" Cole saw the two lines when he returned to Bellwether for Dunham's final disciplinary hearing. He stood in the square for a long time, but did not remove the paper or call anyone to clear it away. The law had done exactly what it had been written to do. It identified the person who pulled the trigger, proved intent, held a trial, and imposed a sentence. Frank paid for the missing camera footage. Dunham lost his career. Marlene lost her license for a time. The foundation collapsed. The hidden records were opened. But the person who received the harshest punishment was still the youngest, the one who had asked for help first, and the only one who had not asked someone else to carry her share of responsibility. Cole had once believed justice failed when the law showed mercy to an offender. The Walter Graves case taught him something more difficult. Sometimes the law does not fail at all. It follows every proper step, and the result is still not enough to call fair. He left the square as the church bells rang 12 times. This time, no one stopped.